One sunny day, a bobcat with golden eyes and a dusty ginger coat wandered onto a stranger's porch. His steps were slow, deliberate, almost hesitant. He climbed onto an old wooden bench, circled once, then stretched out across the sun-warmed slats, his spotted sides rising and falling with quiet breath. There was something disarming about him. Not tame, not wild, exactly, just tired. The man who lived there, a quiet figure named Thomas, stood inside his screen door holding a mug of coffee, blinking like he wasn't sure he was really seeing what he saw. He didn't approach, just watched by the time. He stepped outside hours later. The bobcat was still there, not asleep, not quite alert, resting. Thomas set a plate of cooked chicken beside the bench, then sat across the porch and waited. The bobcat lifted his head, slowly sniffed, and after several long minutes crept to the food. He didn't look at Thomas. He didn't run either. That more than anything convinced Thomas of two things. This animal had known humans, and something had gone very wrong. In the days that followed, the bobcat came back, always around the same time, always alone. His coat was patchy in places, his back leg dragged slightly as if healed wrong after an old break. He walked with a strange tilt to his head, giving him an almost puzzled expression when he looked up from his food. Thomas began leaving water too, then a small pile of blankets near the bench. He told himself it was temporary, but every evening he found himself watching for that silhouette, coming down the hill. He started calling him Rainbow, not for his colors. Those were more dust than anything else, but because of something about his presence. He reminded Thomas of quiet after a storm, but Thomas couldn't keep him. He lived near the edge of protected forest, land, and the state didn't exactly encourage wild animals adopting front porches. He'd done what he could, but Rainbow deserved better. So after 2 weeks of shared space and careful trust, Thomas made a call to Tails High Rescue. He expected hesitation, but the moment he described Bo, his condition, his behavior, how he tilted his head and leaned into the edge of Thomas's hand like he wanted to remember something, the voice on the other end softened. "We'll come get him," the volunteer said. "He sounds like he's been waiting for someone." They arrived with gentle hands and quiet voices. No nets, no poles, just soft blankets, chicken treats, and patience. Rainbow didn't fight. When one of them touched his cheek and he didn't flinch, they knew. Whatever his history was, it had included someone. Holoved him once, he let them lift him. Hell, let them carry him into the waiting crate, and he didn't make a sound. The foster volunteer Mateo was a soft-spoken man with dark curls and hands that knew how to move slowly. He didn't force Rainbow out of the crate when they got home. He just opened the door, sat down on the floor with a book, and waited. 2 hours later, Rainbow padded out and curled up next to him. The sound of his first purr caught Mateo off guard. It wasn't loud. It was more like a low motor os. If the engine of trust was just starting to turn within a day, Rainbow transformed. He followed Mateo from room to room like a shadow head, tilted eyes alert. When Mateo sat, Rainbow climbed into his lap. He kneaded the air with his massive paws pressed, his nose into Mateo's elbow, and stayed there, eye shaft closed, body limp with trust. He purred for hours. It became clear that he hadn't just been lost or wild. He had been starved for affection. This wasn't a creature who'd grown up in isolation. He had known beds, known warmth, known voices that spoke softly in Mateo's care. Rainbow flourished. He learned how to play again, awkwardly at first, batting at dangling feathers with more curiosity than skill. But each day he moved faster, became bolder. He leapt, after toys rolled, on the carpet, stretched out on windowsills to catch sunbeams with his belly, exposed a sign of rare, complete trust. Mateo cleaned his wounds, tended to the old scar on his hind leg, and fed him meals that were always met with eager meows. But Rainbow was never meant to stay. Foster homes are bridges, not destinations. So when Andrew and his 10-year-old son James applied to adopt, everyone held their breath. Mateo invited them over, watched as Rainbow studied them from behind a chair. He didn't hide, he didn't run. He walked up to James first, sniffed his fingers, then rubbed his face along the boy's wrist. James looked up, eyes wide, and whispered, "Helikesme." Andrew knelt down, patient, letting Rainbow decide. The bobcat circled him, once, then climbed into his lap like he'd done it 100 times. Mateo turned away briefly to wipe his eyes. When Rainbow arrived at his new home, he didn't hesitate. He explored. Each room with slow confidence paused at every window to gaze outside, then came back to sit between Andrew and James. On the floor, James gave him a small plush mouse. Rainbow sniffed it, battered it once, then hugged it to his chest and kicked it like a kitten rediscovering joy. That night he slept on James's bed, curled behind the boy's knees. By morning he was waiting at the door when James got up, meowing softly as if recounting his dreams. Andrew made coffee while Rainbow sat nearby, eyes blinking in slow contentment. The house felt more complete. Somehow like something warm had been added that no one realized was missing. Over the next few weeks, Rainbow adjusted completely. He wasn't just a pet, he was family. He waited at the door when James came home from school. He sat under Thedible while Andrew worked occasionally, nudging his knee for attention. He lounged in sunspots across the floor, tail twitching in slow rhythm. His favorite thing was when both father and son sat on the couch. He'd wedge himself between them, purring so loudly it shook the cushions. One afternoon, James brought home a cardboard castle he'd made at school. Rainbow claimed it immediately. He squeezed inside, peeked through the windows, and even battered at James' fingers through the holes. For the first time in his life, the boy felt like he wasn't just taking care of an animal, but that the animal was watching over him too. Andrew often found himself just watching Rainbow, the way he moved, the way he listened, the strange dignity in his posture. Sometimes Rainbow would sit in the hallway for an hour, staring quietly at the front door, like remembering the people he'd known before. Other times he'd run wild through the house, all legs and claws, skidding on rugs with wild abandon. At the vet's office, they confirmed his approximate age, around 4 years old. His injuries were old, but healing well. No one could say exactly what his past had been. A failed exotic pet, a rescue who got loose, an animal who wandered too close to people and forgot how to fear them. It didn't matter. What mattered was who he was now. He was Rainbow, the bobcat who climbed into laps and purred like a tractor. Theon who tilted his head when you talked, like he was listening for something underneath your words. The one who slept in beds and stole socks and greeted sunrise by thumping his tail against the window. He wasn't a pet in the traditional sense. He was a presence, a reminder that healing doesn't always come the way you expect, that sometimes the wild shows up, not to be tamed, but tougher, something deeper. Companionship without condition he didn't follow, commands or fetch toys. But he gave something rarer. He made space feel full. He made quiet moments feel whole. Hair-minded, everyone that trust can take root, anywhere, even in a world that forgets to look up from its rush. He had a way of showing up at just the right time. When James had a bad day, Rainbow would climb into his lap before the boy even spoke. When Andrew felt weighed down by Bill's work and the ache of raising a child alone, Rainbow would settle beside him with that slow, steady purr, as if saying, "I'm here, we're okay." He didn't fix anything, but somehow he made everything a little easier to hold. Neighbors began to ask about him at first. Andrew was cautious. "He's special," he'd say. "Not quite a cat, not quite wild." People tilted their heads when they first saw him, those long legs, that broad face, the quiet intensity of his gaze. No, but Rainbow won them over. He never strayed far from the porch. He never hissed. He never snarled or chased. He sat with the calm of an old soul. He'd stretch out beside James during backyard cookouts, eyes half closed, soaking in the chatter like it fed him. Children tossed him scraps. Grandparents watched in fascination. Teenagers crouched beside him and took selfies. Rainbow, without trying, became part of the rhythm of the neighborhood. Some started calling him the gentle king, others just said, the pork guardian. He became a fixture, something people looked for when they passed. If Rainbow was on the porch, the day felt normal, settled right. He had a way of knowing where to be when the neighbor's baby cried. Rainbow sat under their open window, purring steadily until the child quieted. When a teen across the street came home in tears, Rainbow crossed the yard, stood at the edge of the sidewalk, and waited. The girl crouched down and Rainbow pressed his head gently against her arm. No one trained him, no one expected it. But somehow he knew. He didn't ask for anything, he just showed up and stayed. Sometimes that's all anyone really needs. Even mail carriers adjusted their routes to offer him treats. One elderly woman began, leaving him flowers. For your king, she'd tell Andrew, placing daisies on the porch steps. He's not just yours anymore, you know. He belongs to all of us. One day, Thomas came to visit. He stood at the gate with a smile, unsure if Rainbow would remember time. Had passed Rainbow, had changed, but the Bobcat stepped down from the porch slowly, his gait familiar, deliberate. He walked right up to the old man and leaned against his leg the way he had done so many times before. Insolence. Thomas crouched and pressed, his forehead to Rainbow's. For a long moment they stayed like that, two beings who had given each other something priceless when they needed it most. "You look good, kid," he whispered, voice catching. "Better than ever." James and Andrew stood nearby, watching. No one said much, they didn't have to. Some bonds don't need explaining. Thomas stayed for coffee, sitting on the porch with Andrew, while Rainbow curled at their feet, tail flicking lazily. They laughed softly, shared a few stories, and when Thomas stood to go, he looked younger, somehow lighter. He left with a wave and a grateful nod, the kind that says more than words ever could. James watched him disappear down the path, then looked at Rainbow, who was now sprawled out in the last sunbeam of the day. "Do you miss him?" he asked softly. Rainbow blinked. Then he rolled onto his back paws, and there, completely relaxed. That night, Rainbow curled between Andrew and Jameson, the couch, resting his chin on the boy's knee. The TV played something forgettable, but none of them were really watching. The glow of the screen danced in Rainbow's golden eyes as they blinked. Slowly, in contentment, Andrew reached out and scratched behind Rainbow's ear, the spot that always made his tail thump once like a drumbeat of approval. James yawned, eyes heavy. Rainbow closed his eyes, but his ears flicked still, listening, still present. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, gently carrying with it the scent of pine and warmth from the grill earlier. That day, somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then fell silent. Inside, the house breathed slowly, like it had settled into itself, as if it too had found something it hadn't known it was missing. A sense of peace, a frightness of home. In the corner of the living room, James's cardboard castle still stood, slightly crumpled from Rainbow's adventures inside it. A plush mouse lay nearby, missing one ear. These weren't just toys anymore. They were artifacts of joy, of healing, of the small magic that had taken root inside four walls and spilled gently into the world outside, from stray to sanctuary, from silence to laughter, from porch to family. Rainbow had made his way home and had never looked back.